All right, thanks. Our next speaker is Steve Cronin. He's based in Dubai and is the founder of DeadSimpleSavings.com, a nonprofit website helping expats to save and invest sensibly by themselves. He's also a board member of SimplyFI.org, which is great, which helps UAE residents do the same. He also worked at a top management consultancy for over 10 years. He developed strategies and operating models for banks and sovereign wealth funds. While he's advised princes and prime ministers, he gets more pleasure these days from helping individuals make the most of their hard-earned dirhams and reach financial independence.
Thank you. It is my sincere hope that in 30 years' time, you are more wealthy from having heard my talk. We've accumulated a lot of good financial knowledge today, but knowledge can sometimes be used unwisely. So I want to take everything back to basics in the spirit of the title of our conference, How to Grow Your Personal Wealth. Because sometimes we can get too clever and we can forget about the basics that actually matter more. I just want to take a quick poll in the room to see what we have in here. Can you put your hand up if you actively trade in the stock market? Don't be afraid. Okay, thank you. Can you put your hand up if you're a bit nervous about investing in the stock market, even in a fund? Thank you. And that's in the long term. Probably be nervous now anyway. Also, can you put your hand up if you've invested in a long-term savings plan from a financial advisor in Dubai? Okay, great. Thank you very much. So, some cautionary tales just to focus the mind. My friend, very smart guy, he advises financial services companies, and he bought a house in Florida in 2005. He lives in England. It was an investment, quite a bad investment as it turns out, because the market for houses in Florida went down a lot, maybe about 25% by 2008, and then 45% by 2011. Ouch. The problem with him is he had tried to be too clever because he had taken out a mortgage in Swiss francs, even though he was earning in pounds in London. And while the value of his property was crashing, the Swiss franc against the dollar was climbing rapidly. 35% by 2008, and by 2011, 75%. Not only had the value of his property gone down, the value of his mortgage had gone up hugely. If he had not known about financial services and he hadn't tried to be too clever, he would have just invested in a flat in London. He would have done just fine. Also, some of the people who were just untouchably brilliant in fund management, David Einhorn, Bill Gross, Neil Woodford, these people have lost millions and millions and millions of dollars in the past year. They've lost their golden touch, and some of their portfolios are down 40%. It's quite unbelievable. So what if you lost your touch? If you were actively investing, what if you lost your touch? We need to inoculate you against sorts of behaviors that have led to their fall from grace. Warren Buffett is a great proponent of index investing, even if he doesn't do it himself. But he says investing is simple, but not easy. Why is it not easy? It's not easy because our brain gets in the way. Our brain is not really wired to handle money and investing properly. So you must get your brain out of the way if you are going to be a good investor. I would like to hope that your journey to wealth looks like this wonderful exponential curve here. And what I'm trying to prevent today is that it ends up, let's call it the simple path to wealth. I want it to avoid looking like this. If you are day trading on the stock market, you might have 6 great sessions and then 1 terrible session, or 6 great years and then 1 terrible year. And what if your wife has just given birth in that year when you have a terrible year and you end up starting at 0 and you just have to then go back to the simple path to wealth and admit defeat. But I also want you to avoid the death by 1,000 cuts, where you've taken some bad advice and you've just ended up with a portfolio far lower than you should have done. These are the things that you need to avoid, and I want you to keep that in your mind as we go through this talk. So here are some useful rules so you can grow your personal wealth. Number one, you do not have to work forever. Nobody really teaches this, but the secret to financial independence, the secret to financial independence is that you can quit your job much earlier than you think with a bit of careful planning. If your passive, that's non-work income, is greater than your living expenses, then you do not need a job. Or you can still work, you just take a lower paid job, go and become a photographer or something because you don't care about the money because your living costs have been covered by your passive income from your portfolio. And this requires you to know what your living expenses are. And I expect plenty of you probably don't even know exactly how much you spend each month. Rule 2, have a clear target for your investment portfolio in mind. How much do you actually need? Well, there's a wonderful rule called the 4% rule, which nobody teaches in schools. I don't know why. And this is that every year in retirement, you can take out 4% of your portfolio that's invested sensibly in stocks and bonds, 4% to cover your annual living expenses. And because the stock market, on average, keeps on growing, it's like a bottomless well. You can keep on taking that 4% out every single year. What's the implication of this? It's that if you amass a portfolio of $1 million and your living expenses are only $40,000 a year, you can retire. You have reached financial independence. And if it's 50,000, then you just need 1.25 million. So this gives you a clear target. You know now every single dirham can be given a purpose. Rule 3, save 50% of your income. Lots of people say save 10%, save 20%. If you want to get financial independence truly and early, save 50% of your income, or at least get a little bit closer to it than you are at the moment. I know children are expensive, and I know brunch at Zuma is expensive, but there is a way to do this. You have to understand your income, you have to understand your expenses, and the way to do it is to get off the hedonic treadmill. This is the only, and companies are not going to help you do this. You have to be able to do this yourself and say no to yourself and say no to others who are tempting you out of the way. Number 4, start early. Preferably start today if you haven't started. And keep your fees low. Let's look at this. This person is investing $10,000 every single year. That's actually not very much. Okay, $10,000 every year for 40 years and getting a 7% annual return. Look what they've got at the end of 40 years, a whopping $2.2 million. You are set up for life as long as your living expenses aren't too crazily high. Why? That's updated more than 5 times. Why do we not see that in Dubai very often? Well, the problem is that people here tend to invest in these long-term savings plans with 4% or higher sometimes fees. And that is why these plans are ugly. Marius was talking about ugly things. These long-term savings plans are possibly the ugliest thing that exists in financial services in Dubai. If a financial advisor tries to get you to buy one of these plans, say, no, they're ugly. Just do not invest in these things. Because look at the impact of 4% fees, most of which are hidden from you. You'll never even notice them. Instead of having massive gain, your gains are reduced by 78%. Instead of 2.2 million, you've only got about 700,000 just because you trusted an advisor who was chasing their commission. So I want to inoculate you against that sort of mistake. Rule number 5, you have to have a solid core of long-term investments. I was very pleased to hear our experts in the first session say this, essentially in total agreement with this. Invest for the long term and invest in sensible stuff. It's very simple. Your core portfolio should be in index funds, bond funds, property, perhaps cash. By all means, be my guest, invest in active funds, invest in stocks, invest in FX, commodities, do angel investments, do startups, but put that in your satellites. So this is the core satellite model. Your fun stuff, which I include day trading, that fun stuff should be only a satellite of your total portfolio. And as a good rule of thumb, it should never be more than 10% of your portfolio. Because then if something goes wrong, you still have your core to protect you. In fact, it enables you to take more risk and have more fun in your satellites. What do you think the majority of the portfolios of the top CEOs, investment banks in America are investing? Do you think they're all invested in risky stocks? No. They're invested in super boring Vanguard passive index funds. And there's no reason why you cannot do exactly the same. In fact, it's never been cheaper to do this. So, how do you invest sensibly in the stock market? Because the stock market is the world's biggest wealth creator over the long term. But let's take a look at the average return over 30 years of the stock market. 10.6% in America, but the average US investor, 3.98%. What has gone wrong? A number of things. They've been paying high fees to advisors and to fund managers. Or they've been picking stocks, or worse than all, they've been trying to time the market. They're like, oh, 2018, 2019, looking a little bit peaky, I'm going to jump out of the market. I met someone the other day who had jumped out of the market in 2016, and the market's gone way up since then. He completely missed the bus, and he's feeling stupid. That's why, in some studies, the best investors have been either dead or forgotten that they even had an account in the first place, and therefore they haven't been trying to jump in and out of the market. So how do you do this? Just invest in index funds of multiple stocks. It massively reduces the risk through diversification. And also, invest every single month, or if you don't have a lot to invest every single quarter. That way, you will ride out all the ups and the downs. And you don't have to worry about how psychologically difficult investing is. You don't even have to read the FT or even know what the value of your portfolio is. Maybe check it once a year, just for fun. Because do you really think that people jumping in and out of the market could catch here in 2009 just how rapid that recovery was? Or even now, December 24th, 2018. What a crazily rapid reversal that was. There's almost no way that you could have spotted it. So don't bother. The way to catch this is if you had been investing every single month the same amount. Well, actually, you would have caught this downturn, and a reasonable chunk of your portfolio would then be invested there. Actually, unless you're close to retirement, let's say before 5 years to retirement, you should be delighted when the stock market goes down because the stocks are going on sale and you can get more value for your money buying stocks that are discounted. So, I believe the only stock fund an expat will ever need, this is what I invest in, is the Vanguard ETF VWRD. They all have cutesy four-letter acronyms. The Vanguard FTSE All World UCITS ETF in dollars. Why is it in dollars? It's because we earn in dollars, so you might as well, effectively, in dirhams, so you might as well invest in dollars. What's an ETF? It's an exchange-traded fund, but it might as well be called Expat Total Freedom because they are so cheap and they give you access to such a huge portfolio of diversified stocks. In fact, the FTSE All World Fund has over 3,000 stocks in 47 countries. It's massively diversified, and it's based on indices. So when the S&P or FTSE 100 or whatever have stocks that fall out of those indices because they're doing badly, you no longer invest in them. It's self-cleansing. And again, you don't have to do anything other than put money in every single month. You should also make sure that you're not investing in US domiciled funds if you are not a US citizen, because there's a risk that you'll get hit by US estate tax of 40%, which is pretty painful. And that's why I recommend Irish domiciled ETFs with UCITS in the name. How about bonds? You can protect your portfolio with a bond fund against downturns so that you never have to sell stocks during a downturn. That's pretty much the only reason that in your core portfolio you should invest in bonds, so that you don't have to sell stocks in a downturn. Because if you are relying on this portfolio for your retirement and you start selling stocks in a downturn, your portfolio will be depleted very rapidly. You must avoid that. The way to do it is to sell your bonds instead, or make sure you have some other form of income that will protect you. So I recommend sticking to short-term, high-rated government bonds. As you see, they'll ride out the downturn, and that will enable you to not have to sell stocks in a downturn. I recommend a couple of ETFs here, IGLO, IAAA. They're all good for this. Your asset allocation, lots of people tear their hair out about asset allocation, but it should be based on your time to retirement, your other income sources, and your tendency to panic. You have to understand your own psychology. If you're going to invest in 100% stocks, then you better make sure you have some other income sources and also an iron stomach. If you're going to invest in 80% stocks, 20% bonds, which is perhaps a reasonable compromise, this gives you some buffer in the event of a downturn, but it also gives you a nice path to growth. Or if you're retired or you've only got less than 5 years to retirement, you can invest in 60% stocks and 40% bonds. Like my mother, she's retired, she's 75, that's what she invests in. There's a bit of a trick to investing from the UAE in these ETFs, because Vanguard does not allow us to invest as expats directly. So you need to go through an offshore brokerage. I recommend Interactive Brokers. That's what I use because they're cheap and large. And to do that, you can also send the money very cheaply through UAE Exchange. They have a free club exclusive program that you can join, and that will enable you to invest in Vanguard in a way that you wouldn't otherwise be able to as an expat. This is my 10-step plan. I'm not going to go through this because we've run out of time, but this is how you can achieve financial independence. And instead of spending time tracking the market, unless you want to, you can go out and live your best life. So I recommend committing today to take action, to figure out how to earn more, to spend less, and invest the difference. Thank you very much.